Hello, I'm Kaiser and welcome to Moose Reads. Before I get started, I want to say that the opinions that I give here are my own opinions. They are extremely subjective. If I dislike a book, it is not a reflection on the author, and it is not a reflection on people who do like it. Different people have different tastes, and that's okay. Some channel notes. If you actually follow the channel, you know that I completely failed in December, and mostly in November before that. But I am absolutely determined to fix my shit. The current plan is to put the first 4 reviews from last month up next week, finish with Celestial Monsters on the Monday after, and then post December's reviews 3 days a week after that. That will leave me with just 1 review pushed into February, which is the first in a trilogy and can therefore slide in with its siblings quite nicely. I will do it. Okay, on to the December wrap-up. In December, I read 9 books. These books totaled 2,925 pages, with an average of 325 pages per book and 94 pages per day. There should be chapters marked so you can easily skip around. First up in December was my book club book, Lord of Eternal Night by Ben Alderson. This is a fantasy romance novel. The description says, Jack's life has only one meaning: break the curse or die trying. Marius's life has no meaning, not since he was cursed into the twisted, bloodthirsty creature of the night. For years, the witches have waited for their salvation, a way to return the magic that was sacrificed when the curse was first cast. Jack, a boy born with the power that the witches have not seen in a century, is their prophesied savior, the one who is to kill the creature, break the curse, and restore the magic to his coven. Sent to the creature's castle as the final claim, Jack must get close enough to land the fatal blow. It is what he has trained all his life to accomplish. Not all is what it seems when Jack uncovers secrets and half-truths. The creature is not the haunting beast he had been brought up to hate. Emotions war as new feelings are uncovered. For what is more dangerous than hate? Lust. 2 stars. I should have liked this, but it just wasn't very well executed. I didn't like either protagonist at the start or end of the book, though I warmed up to them a bit in the middle. There are also multiple small things that don't make much sense to me. The biggest problem I had with this book was the ending. It failed to feel satisfying on any level, and involved some parts that were extremely contrived. Not a great book. Would not recommend. After that was the first of my challenge books for the month, a book in a series with more than 10 entries, for which I read The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. This is the first book in the Oz series. It is a fantasy novel. The description says, Follow Dorothy Gale, a young girl from Kansas, as a powerful cyclone transports her to the magical land of Oz. Accompanied by her loyal dog Toto, Dorothy sets out on a journey to find the wizard, who she hopes can help her return home. Along the way, she befriends the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion, each searching for something they lack and discovering their true strengths. 3 stars. It's fine. It's a kid's book, so it uses simple language and simple concepts, but it's entertaining enough. You're probably familiar with the movie, and it's mostly the same tone and plot, just with more in the book. There were a few differences that surprised me, but I'll get into those in the review proper. All in all, I think it holds up pretty well as a kid's book, and I don't remember any egregious examples of it being a product of its time, though I may have just forgotten or missed them. Third up was a surprise entry coming in from the library, My Kind of Trouble by L.A. Schwartz. This is a romance novel. The description says, Conwoman Harmony Hale has sold lies up and down California for years, never looking back at her crafty scams or one-night stands. Now she's come to Brookville, California, with her sights set on its wealthy mayor, the man who stole her father's music streaming algorithm and ruined his life. Harmony is finally ready to take him down, with her trusty con of selling a non-existent music festival. All she needs is the cooperation of the man who owns the potential festival site. Autistic librarian and piano teacher Preston Jones spends his days fighting book challengers trying to shut down his library programs. He's responsible for raising his selectively non-speaking little sister and needs to focus on keeping his job. He doesn't have time for a romance like the ones in his books, and certainly none for the brassy festival promoter who wants to use his land for her Coachella North. Preston sees things in black and white, and he sees Harmony, amazing curves, flashy smile and all, as nothing but trouble. But when Harmony promises to help him win the public over and save his youth programs, Preston finds himself wondering if this hustler with a heart of gold might be the someone he's been waiting for. Soon, things are getting steamy in the stacks, and with her con coming to a crescendo, Harmony needs to choose revenge and running again, or the happy ending she never saw coming. 4 stars. I liked this a lot. It was charming and witty. The characters were good, the plot was good. It's a good book. Not perfect. You could see the third act breakup coming from a mile away, and how it came about still felt kind of forced. But overall, a good time. If the description sounds at all appealing to you, I recommend checking it out. Then, as my second challenge book, a book in a series with 5 to 10 books, I read Rainbow Valley by L.M. Montgomery. This is the 7th book in the Anne of Green Gables series. It is a historical slice-of-life novel. The description says, Anne's wonderful, lively children found a special place all their own. Rainbow Valley was the perfect spot to play, to dream, and to make the most unusual friends, like the Merediths. They were 2 girls and 2 boys who had no mother. What they did have was a minister father who was looking for a wife, but so far had found nothing but heartbreak. Between the minister courting a young spinster and the escapades of the restless children, the town was bubbling with scandal. But in the end, the warmth and laughter of Anne of Green Gables taught all an unforgettable lesson of love. 3 stars. Honestly, if I were judging this based on how it fits into the series, it would get a lower rating. Anne has been slowly sliding out of these books for a while now, but not only is she barely in this one, her kids aren't all that prominent either. The entire book is about the Meredith children, who do play with the Blythe kids, but mostly have escapades on their own. Also, this one comes with 2 content warnings. It does have one of those awkward product of its time issues, where one of the characters casually uses the N slur. It also has the worst example of pet death I've ever seen, so if you or your kids are sensitive to that kind of thing, steer clear. For my 5th book, I finally got around to reading Remnants of Filth Volume 5 by Wrapup. This is a fantasy romance, the description says. Now that Moji has uncovered the truth after 8 long years, he and Gumong finally have a chance to clear away the lies of the past. Both know the moments they share are destined to be fleeting. Despite his efforts to remain lucid, Gumong's memories from the time mirror continue to slip away, and dark magic eats at his mind. Yet peace at home is short-lived, as new threats gather at the frontier. When the Lao Kingdom attacks once again, Gumong will join his former master, Muronglian, as well as Moji, and confront their nation's darkest enemy. Their mission, to neutralize an ancient danger inextricably tied to Changhua's most secret history. 5 stars. I still adore this series. This book was mostly a lot softer than any of the previous volumes. It gets a little rocky toward the end, but honestly not nearly as bad as I expected, given how lighthearted and fluffy the beginning felt. I still want everyone in the world to read this series, and I still recognize that most people probably wouldn't like it nearly as much as I do. After that was the 3rd of my challenge books, a standalone novel, which comes in the form of The First Wives Club by Olivia Goldsmith. This is a... You know what? I'll just talk about this after the description, which says, Elise, Brenda, and Annie have one thing in common. They were all first wives. Make that 2 things in common. They were the secret to success for each of their spouses, faithfully supporting them as they rose to the top. Okay, 3 things. They were each abandoned for younger, blonder, sleeker women, trophy wives for their exes to sport about town. It may not be on the menu at New York's finer restaurants, but revenge is a dish best served cold. And while lunching at Le Cirque, the ladies decide the time for self-pity is over. Now, it's time to get even. I'm not rating this one. My feelings for this book are extremely complicated, and I can't really do them justice here. With regards to the genre, I'm pretty sure most people would call this women's literature, but I hate the idea that we need a special category of books for women because they're about women, so I refuse. It's also theoretically a comedy, but I would definitely argue with that. If you've seen the movie, aside from the main characters and the basic plot, the two have very little in common. Generally, I came away feeling like I'd rather watch the movie than read the book, but also that the book is still technically better. It's an experience. Also, talking about products of their time, this book gets so many content warnings. First of all, slurs abound, including slurs against Hispanic people, Italian people, black people, Jewish people, gay people, and developmentally disabled people. Though I feel I should note that last was not used with the intention to insult like the rest of them, but it's still not a good word. Also worth noting, aside from the last three in that list, the slurs are only used once each, to my recollection, and always by people you are supposed to think are awful. Then, slurs aside, additional content warnings for suicide, abuse, fat phobia, possible marital rape, although it was unclear, and a brief mention of pedophilia, rape, and incest. I'm also pretty sure that even when it's theoretically trying to be respectful, this book is probably just overall offensive to Jewish people. I'm not Jewish, I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's not good. Like I said, I think the book is technically better than the film, but it is an extremely uncomfortable experience. If you're curious, approach it with caution, but I wouldn't necessarily discourage checking it out. Having gotten through that, my brother and I read They Hate Each Other by Amanda Woody as our monthly audiobook. This is a romance novel, the description says. There are plenty of words Jonah Collins could use to describe Dylan Ramirez. Arrogant, spoiled, and golden boy, to name a few. Likewise, Dylan thinks he has Jonah accurately labeled as an attention-seeking asshat who never shuts his filthy mouth. Their friends are convinced Jonah's and Dylan's disdain for one another is just thinly veiled lust, a rumor that surges like wildfire when the two wake up in one bed after homecoming. Mutually horrified, Dylan and Jonah agree to use the faux pas to their advantage by fake dating. If they can stay convincing long enough to end their relationship in a massive staged fight, they can prove their incompatibility to their friends once and for all. But the more time they spend together, the more their plan begins to fall apart, and the closer they come to seeing each other clearly for the first time. 4 stars. This was kind of a surprise. I picked it because it sounded mildly interesting, but I didn't have high expectations. But it was so good. The description sounds extremely lighthearted, but both boys are struggling with some major issues, and seeing them get to know each other and help each other was a lovely, if heartbreaking, experience that the description in no way prepares you for. Also, this was the rare audiobook where I didn't hate the narrator, so that's a plus. Absolutely would recommend. Then, for my 8th book, I got my January book club from the library. That would be Magic and Misrule by K.M. Merritt. This is the first in the Mishaps Heroes series. It is a fantasy novel, the description says. Vola might be new to this whole adventuring thing, but she's pretty sure this isn't how you're supposed to save the day. No one at her academy wanted an orc as a paladin, so they've sent her to the back end of a swamp, hoping she'll never find a quest good enough to earn her shield. Well, screw that. Vola's got divine help, and even a laughingstock of a goddess can do some righteous smiting. Armed with a new mission to find some missing orphans, Vola just needs a team to help her track them down. Beggars can't be choosers, but couldn't her goddess have sent her at least one competent fighter? Now she's stuck with a hyperactive halfling, a klutzy spellcaster, and a cloaked mystery who's a little too good with their knives. Can a half-orc paladin keep her new party alive in a swamp that's determined to eat them, or are all the naysayers right, and orcs really can't be heroes? 3 stars. This was pretty good, honestly. The characters were fairly charming, and the plot was decent. There's really not much I have to complain about, or that I didn't like about it. It just didn't quite have that magic to get me all that invested. So I don't think I'm going to read the rest of the series. And last of the month was my final challenge book, a book in a trilogy, The Will of the Wanderer by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. This is the first book in the Rose of the Prophet series. It is a fantasy novel, the description says. Since time began, 20 gods have ruled the universe. Though each god possessed different abilities, each was all-powerful within his realm. Now, one of the gods has upset the balance of power, leaving the others scrambling for control in the new order. Here is the epic tale of the great war of the gods, and the proud people upon whom the fate of the world depends. When the god of the desert, Akron the Wanderer, declares that two clans must band together despite their centuries-old rivalry, their first response is outrage. But they are a devout people, and so reluctantly bow to his bidding. Enemies from birth, the headstrong Prince Cardan and impetuous Princess Zora must unite in marriage to stop Kar, the god of reality, greed, and law, from enslaving their people. 3 stars. This book has an interesting setup, and it was entertaining enough, but largely it felt like an entire book of setup, so it's hard to really get attached to it. There's also kind of an issue that makes me feel a little uncomfortable with it. See, apparently after finishing the Darksword trilogy, the authors were trying to decide what to write next, and one of them, Hickman, I think, was reading the Arabian Nights at the time, so they decided to do a fantasy series in that kind of setting. Supposedly they did a lot of research into the culture and all that, and it does mostly feel like they are trying to be respectful and not point at the Middle East and say, "Look at those barbarians." But I'm still not confident that the whole thing wouldn't be offensive. I'll believe they did their research, but I also have to acknowledge that it's research done in the 80s, which means they almost certainly had rather biased resources to work with. I honestly don't know anywhere near enough to make an educated assessment of the accuracy of its portrayal. I can mostly say that it's fantasy, so it doesn't actually represent any people, and enjoy it for what it is. But it's not my culture they are using as a backdrop, so that's easy for me to do. This one also gets content warnings for slavery, and honestly for rape, or at least attempted rape, though they don't really acknowledge that that's what's happening. That's all the books I read in December. My plans for January are thus. As predicted, I didn't manage to finish all the books I'd planned for December before the year ran out. So the first things I'll be reading are The Paladin of the Night and The Prophet of Akron by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman to finish the trilogy. Then I will finish reading Rilla of Ingleside, which means finishing the Anne of Green Gables series. I picked up a copy of The Postman by David Brin because I liked the movie and I didn't know it was a book until I saw it at a thrift store, so I'll read that. I also got a book called The Name of This Book is Secret by Pseudonymous Bosch from the thrift store because it says it's got puzzles and I was just coming off my disappointment with reading Puzzled when my brother pointed it out to me, so I'm going to read that as well. I picked You Asked for Perfect by Laura Silverman for this month's audiobook, but since it's extremely short, clocking in at just over 6 hours, I'm also throwing Hero by Perry Moore onto the list. And then, speaking of lists, I plan to read The Boyfriend List by J.L. Weiler, which is one of hundreds of ebooks I thought sounded interesting enough to get for free, but haven't read yet. I also have Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb on hold at the library for February's book club, but it's estimating 6 weeks, so it probably won't happen this month. I'll almost certainly read more than that, since averaging 100 pages or 4 hours a day with just those books only gets me to the 20th, but who knows. If you like this video, I hope you'll watch more in the future. Thanks for watching this one. Bye!